So I noticed that your lawn maybe needs a little help. Are you interested in anything like that?
So essentially you're telling me that my lawn looks like crap? That's kind of rude.
Well, no, I'm just saying that...
It's 2025. All I need to do is watch some YouTube videos.
Okay, sorry for bothering you.
Wait, aren't you that lawn care guy from YouTube?
I might be.
Well, in that case, why didn't you lead with that? Let's do it.
Welcome to Lawn Rescue. This has been an idea that I've had for a long time, and I finally found, I think, the perfect space here to come out and take a lawn that needs a lot of work and turn it into something in the end that's going to hopefully be beautiful, and it's going to showcase the transformation that we've done here. Now, this is what I would kind of consider a reality series, except it's going to be actual reality, where this thing doesn't get fixed in a week and we come back and show you a beautiful lawn. It's going to take weeks, months, however long, we actually don't really know, and that's part of the challenge and is part of the journey that we're going to go on here, which starts today. So we're located today just outside of Nashville, and the reason that this is a good location is to kind of have a challenge as far as the transition zone goes. So transition zone is essentially where it's a little warm in the summer for cool season grass, and it can sometimes be too cold in the winter for a warm season grass. So it's not an ideal situation for either one of those things, but that gives us a good challenge here to work on something. Now we're going to look today at the existing yard. We're going to measure out some things so that we figure out how much space we have, and that's going to tell us in the future pretty much everything as far as applications and grass seed and whatever else we need to do. Then we're also going to talk about just a bit of a plan maybe as to what's going to go on this season. How much I'm going to be here, I don't know exactly, but we're going to fill in all those gaps as we go. So let's get to it. So we're going to look at probably the worst part of the yard today. It's extremely windy out here, so hopefully we also have audio, but otherwise I will overdub some stuff here. But essentially, this is looking at the worst part of the yard, and there's really not even hardly any grass here. Maybe, what do you say, Reed?
I mean,
less than 10%.
Less than 10% coverage, I would say, yeah.
There's a couple of little clumps of some fescue, and it looks to me, I was actually here at one point last year during the summertime, or when was it? I can't remember, but I got to see the yard before it got completely destroyed. And I think whatever was in here, it looked like there was a bit of bluegrass mixed in, and it got so hot and everything dry last year. You guys had a bit of a...
We had probably one of the, I don't know if it was the worst droughts on record, but it obviously affected a lot of the yards around here, and once you get behind on the watering, it was game over. We never got it to come back,
Yep. So a lot of this is just die-off at this point. You got just a few little bits of fescue left, but everything else is just dead, and then of course the weeds will take advantage of all that and start to come in. So what this is looking like to me, if you have any sort of situation like this, is there's just not really much hope as far as trying to renovate that. There's no grass here to renovate. So these are the sections, kind of a small front yard that we're looking to do a full seed on and get some better grass in here and get some water. Main thing here in the backyard that's going to have to be dealt with eventually is just how bumpy it is. There's some possible landscaping work and some possible things up by the deck that are going to take place. This whole area back here is probably going to be more of an overseed situation and just try to deal with what we have here and not redo everything. But we're going to wait for some of that work to be done and see what kind of damage gets done from that, and then start to work on the rest of this. But it's unfortunately extremely bumpy back here as far as the soil goes. I'm gonna see if maybe we can do a little bit with that back here, but there's a pretty good amount of existing turf back here that I plan to keep. So like you just kind of have to work it down. So you work down? Yeah, so just put pressure on it. There you go. Okay. It's gonna be about 6 inches. So keep going. I think I'm not. just get rid of that.
And you're gonna send that in for samples?
Yep, and then we just want to take like random areas.
0.6 inches.
All right.
It's not as bad as you thought.
No. So of course you can probably hear in the background that this is still kind of a construction area going on. So anytime you have a new build, you don't know exactly what's going to go on with the soil. I was actually pleasantly surprised here when we took these samples to find that there wasn't a lot of compaction. The soil actually, it does have some different layers into it as far as some different materials. Some of it's clay, some of it breaks apart easier, but the main thing is you don't want it to be absolutely hard as a rock if possible, because the compaction part is probably the more difficult part to deal with compared to just having some clay or something in there. Once we get some good grass growing in here, I'm not going to be concerned about that really whatsoever. It's going to start to make some great soil. It's one thing people don't realize is the better the grass that you can get growing, the more that root cycling is going to happen. You're going to start to actually build your soil and build some things in there and start a really healthy turf going. For the last few years, I've been using a company called RX Soil for my soil testing, and unfortunately they have decided to end their business this year. So they were actually sending all of their samples to Waypoint, and that is actually who I started sending my samples to long ago. I prefer a lab test, and I prefer the method that they are doing, which is a Malic 3 is what it's called, all nerdy stuff. But there's lots of different methods out there right now, and I prefer the lab test, the consistency of what I'm getting, and I can look at those results and know for sure that I know how to interpret them. I'm going to bring this back home and send this off, but there's locations for them across the country. I don't know exactly what the prices have gone to when I sent them a few years ago. It was actually fairly affordable. Otherwise, you may have a university in your area that can do a soil test for you, and those are usually fairly inexpensive too. But this doesn't necessarily 100% have to be done, but especially in a situation like this where I don't know the soil, I don't know what's going on with it, especially knowing what the pH level is and if we have to make any adjustments there long term, it's just nice to know at the beginning, and it doesn't cost all that much to figure that out. Also, we're going to know what's in the soil as far as nutrients goes, and if we're really low on something, then we can start to target that. But usually broad general fertilizers are going to cover a lot of this stuff anyway for you, but it's just nice to know at the beginning, if possible, do a simple test to find all that out. The next couple steps here are going to be figuring out some irrigation for this lawn. You really can't do a whole lot in the heat of the summer in these areas without having at least some control of the water. Now you can go out and do it yourself, but if you can get an irrigation system put in and take some of that guesswork out of it for you, that's going to help a lot. So we're going to start with that. Then we'll just come up with a plan from there and work that plan for the rest of the season and see where we end up. All right, so I have the soil test report in hand now, and we can take a look at this. It actually looks pretty good overall. The main things, like I said, that you want to look at are your pH, number one. Hopefully we are somewhere between a 6 and a 7 if possible, but at my old house I was over 7. Actually, here at my new location I am under 6. That doesn't mean that you can't grow great grass. If you're not in that window, that's just more of the ideal place that you want to be. So if you're on the low side, you could use some lime in order to try to raise the pH. If you're on the high side, you could try some elemental sulfur, or also using ammonium sulfate as your nitrogen source is going to help to bring that down just slightly. But it's going to take some time to do all of that, but those are the routes that I would go to try to do a little soil amending if you need to. Then the next thing we're going to look at here is the macros. Of course, nitrogen is not on this test because nitrogen is needed every single season for the grass to be at its best. And the levels are going to change in the soil up and down quite a bit, so that's not something that's even tested here because we know that we need to apply nitrogen during the season in order for things to be growing their best. The other macros though that we wanted to get a look at were phosphorus and potassium. So you can see here that phosphorus is quite high in this soil. That simply means we won't be using any granulars that have any phosphorus in them to add any more to the soil. You can do things like bag your grass and keep the clippings off there to try to lower this a little bit, but I'm just gonna go with not applying anything right now, maybe doing some bagging, and we'll see what these numbers look like in the future. But definitely don't need to be adding anything else as far as phosphorus goes. Potassium here, we could focus on a fertilizer that's going to have the nitrogen and potassium in it for this season. Then you don't need to really get caught up too much on these numbers of the micros. They are there though to give you a bit of a guide going forward. So if lots of these numbers are on the low side, you could do a more broad micronutrient type of application. But you can see here we have a lot of iron in the soil. Actually, I have a very similar thing here on my location. That simply means that we don't need to go overboard on applying a bunch of iron, which is typically something that people will do to try to get the grass to grow greener, a little bit darker, richer color to it. But right here we have plenty of iron in this soil that we should be able to kind of have that already in place for us. You know, if you didn't do this soil test, again, it's not going to be like you can't have a great yard by any means, but you might have been looking and just applying something that had phosphorus in it. Don't really need any phosphorus. You might be going and applying something that had an extra boost of iron in it, and we don't really need any of those things. Especially with phosphorus, we don't want to be applying any more than that on this just because we already have a very high level. So those are the things that this can help. And again, looking at the pH is just going to help you to make sure that you're within that range if possible, and making some decisions if you're not, so that you can try to amend the soil just a little bit. Liquid applications are not going to move the needle on this very much. There's very small amounts that you're applying in those liquids, and it's going foliar through the plant instead of being utilized as much by the soil. I won't say that none of it is getting to the soil, because some of it would be irrigated in and goes to the soil. However, just remember that if you are looking at your soil test and you're seeing some low numbers and you're just going to do a few applications of liquid in a season, that's not really going to be doing a whole lot for you in terms of moving those numbers on the soil test. So keep those things in mind. A lot of cool season lawns should be doing most of the work in a project like this in the late summer to early fall season. I'm gonna go get another assessment of how things are looking after the irrigation goes in, see if there's anything we can do in the meantime, but most of this is going to be happening in the late summer to early fall to really get things back in order and try to do our best here to turn this thing around as quickly as we can. I think you're going to find with a few key steps this season we can make some major progress, and I'm looking forward to it. Thanks so much for watching today, and we'll see you next time.
Oh, and by the way, if you couldn't tell, I'm Ryan's younger brother.